So I'm with Dan Sztrajt, the principal of Mount Scopus College, and you've just had quite an eventful weekend, not what you expected when you became principal of Mount Scopus College. What do you think that's meant for us as a community in the broader sense? Because it's a pretty horrible thing to do.
Absolutely. Look, firstly, Gary, thank you so much for having me on. This is a real privilege. It's unfortunate that that we're doing this off the back of what's happened.
Yes.
I think this was a moment for the community, not just for Scopus, but for the Jewish community in Australia. I almost feel as though everyone in the Jewish community right now has felt the scourge of anti-Semitism in a way that I don't think most people who are alive and with us today have actually felt in their lifetime.
That's right.
And I think many people over the last 6 months have been, more than 6 months now, 8 months, have been incredibly frightened by not understanding that things they thought about Australian culture, things they thought about their colleagues, beliefs they held about, our democracy and how things work have just been shattered. Yes. How the media works, so much of things that we've held near and dear to us are just so different. And this event that happened on Shabbat, I feel like that has now brought it to the surface for first of all, the Jewish community to really go, wow, okay, this wasn't just me. I wasn't just feeling
that really
something.
hit us between the eyes, yes.
Absolutely. But also for the non-Jewish community, the amount of contact that we've had from not just, parliamentarians and those sorts of things, but local residents, church groups, other schools. We have received so much support because I think it's now real for others.
Right.
There's a community out there who are aware now that we're hurting.
So you've been put in a position where all of a sudden you're from school principal running a massive school, et cetera, to being in front of a school, in front of the fence, in front of a whole lot of cameras and reporters. And how do you think the media, and that's how the community learns about it, how do you think they've dealt with it? And while you've been on camera or on the microphone or whatever, do you think you got a good run, a fair run? Did you want to say more? How did that go?
I definitely wanted to say more. And in actual fact, why I'm so happy to be able to speak to you is I feel as though I can be a little bit more open and honest here. And I think the conversation can reach a level of depth that is a bit more serious. You speak in front of the media for maybe 20 minutes and you know that they're going to capture a 3 or 4 second soundbite.
Correct.
And some are better than others, but that's been a whirlwind as well. I've done a lot of media over the last few days, had no intention of doing any, but people have asked and you feel as though, you want the Jewish community to know, you want the wider community to know what's happened. And there's a responsibility to make sure that people are aware of what's happened. Otherwise, it's just another, Sunday, Monday.
Yeah.
What I've noticed with the way that things have been presented in the media is each media outlet, each media personality has their own agenda.
Right.
And they will use your story to promote the agenda that they are putting forward. And that's not news to anyone. No. I think everyone is well aware that certain journalists have a particular angle.
Yes.
And certainly there are companies out there that have media companies that have a particular political lens.
Yes.
But I think
the politicians deal with it. And also have a particular horse to ride.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting, and I'm happy to get into a little bit of that because so much of what's happened is not only dealing with the actual crisis itself and dealing with students, dealing with parents who have been concerned, dealing with staff. I have tremendous sympathy for some of our non-Jewish staff members who started at the beginning of the year and, it was confronting enough walking into a school with armed guards, but suddenly for this to happen and they're right in the middle of it. They've had 10 seconds to get to know the community and suddenly they're living and breathing some of the challenges that the Jewish community has faced for months, but also for centuries.
Yes, I was going to get to that, and we will revisit that. But I did want to ask, For instance, he did a long 5 minutes, I think, with Ralph Epstein, for instance, the other day. Do you think you got out what you wanted to get out in that? Or does he sort of curtail the discussion to...
Look,
And that could be any journalist. I just plucked.
Yeah. Look. I spoke to Raf. I spoke to a handful of other journalists as well, and I felt it's interesting. The questions the journalists will ask are driving you to a particular answer. They want to know about this. There are plenty of leading questions, and while my attempts have been to raise a public awareness around a wider issue around this anti-Semitism, that it's not, people have this sense that a genuine anti-Semite is someone on the real fringe of society,
yes,
with swastikas tattooed to their forehead, and that's not what we're talking about.
No.
That is a danger, absolutely. I'm sure there are a handful of people like that, but actually the bigger danger right now is that elements of hatred against Jewish people in Israel have sort of intertwined, and what we're seeing is it becoming mainstream. I don't hate Jews, but I don't think Zionists have a right to exist.
Yeah.
And when you make,
without even understanding what the difference, if there is a difference.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so, I'll get up in front of a gaggle of media and I'll say, I specifically wanted to address that and say, when you've got a Jewish community where the vast majority of people identify with a connection to Israel.
Yeah.
And in fact, I didn't go into this detail, but even the ones that don't, they're identifying by the fact that they don't connect to the modern state of Israel, but they still connect to the land of Israel. There is no Jewish culture, Jewish heritage, Jewish practice, Jewish religion without Israel.
Exactly.
And it's important that people understand that, so that when they hear the Zionists not welcome on our university campus chants,
yes,
even that, which sounds pretty innocuous, that is a call to say Jews are not welcome here.
Oh, and I know of a case where it's happened. A kippah-wearing kid who was at Melbourne University, I know, was harangued by the encampment because all he did was walk by and he was wearing a kippah.
Yeah. And suddenly, that line between Israel and Judaism gets muddled. But yes. I think it becomes dangerous. It becomes very dangerous when those lines are getting muddled, and well-meaning people, who I think most Australians are very frightened of calling out something that is borderline. Oh, he just said, death to the Zionists. Is that anti-Semitism? I'm actually not sure. I don't think it is. Or maybe it is. Maybe they have freedom of speech. And I think universities are being caught up in that constantly.
Yes, and each one's dealt with it differently.
Correct. And some much better than others, most very slowly.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we've really bore the brunt of that. And I mean that as the Jewish community, but I also mean that as Jewish schools.
Absolutely.
Are feeling it. Certainly Jewish university students, obviously they're feeling it the most. But I think that there are year 11, year 12 students, their families, they're coming to us, they're asking genuinely, this isn't me, taking one example and going to the nth degree here. Our careers counsellor here, who is not Jewish herself, but she's up in arms about this because of the number of families that have come to her and said, what universities are still safe for my child to attend as a Jew?
Yeah.
This is 1800
that's
stuff.
Unthinkable,
this is insanity.
Yeah.
But it's real, and she's come together with a whole lot of other careers counsellors, Jewish and non-Jewish, from Jewish and non-Jewish schools, and they're putting together frameworks to help other careers counsellors help Jewish families, which I think is incredible and phenomenal.
Are they feeding back this reaction to the universities that they deal with?
So, look, there are a number of attempts, and some of them I've agreed to. There are some that the other Jewish school principals, together with myself, are doing, and I've agreed not to disclose anything. The Jewish school principals, we work together to speak to each of the different universities.
Sure.
But we made an agreement that we wanted to create change rather than create a media story.
Good.
So we decided that we wouldn't go public with any of this until we'd actually had a chance to speak to the vice-chancellors of universities, to put a case before them, to ask them for change. And with some, we have received phenomenal responses. With others, we've been bitterly disappointed.
Right.
And at some point we're going to come back to the community with some findings around that. But that's a huge issue right now.
It is a massive issue. What's the reaction? You hinted about the reaction of students and staff just this week so far. It's only Tuesday today, but everybody saw what happened. What sort of feedback are you getting? And not only what sort of feedback are you getting, but what sort of messages has the school put out? Because I'm sure you would have informed your families.
Absolutely. Look, we wanted to get something out to our families immediately after Shabbat, so that they knew what was going on, because many of the families had already heard rumours and were seeing footage on social media. So we wanted to put out something to families to reassure them. It was nice that by the time we actually were able to get something out, we sent something out specifically to parents, staff and students, and it was slightly different on each one of those. We were very happy to say that, the graffiti was gone. It had been
replaced with an Israel Chai banner, which is very nice.
Yes, and very intentionally, it was interesting. We were having a conversation, and as you do, you have these crisis meetings where we're meeting with lots of different teachers. There's lots of WhatsApp going on all through Sunday, and one of the key points, and it was magnificent, it was our CCJE team, our co-curricular Jewish education team. They were saying when students come on campus, we want them to feel strong and powerful and resilient.
Yeah.
We don't want them cowering. And one of them said it brilliantly. They said, they're not coming onto campus for Yom HaShoah, they're coming onto campus for Yom HaTzmaut. That's what it needs to feel like. And we had a whole big discussion about what are the small things you can do at the school that make people walk in with their head held high.
So that was one of my questions, is how do we teach resilience?
So that's the whole game. So look, anyway, to continue off the back of that and go into resilience.
Yes.
Look, we obviously put the big Magen David and the Yisrael Chai out there. We intentionally didn't put it where the graffiti was. We wanted the students to see, as the buses drove in, the graffiti was removed. We wanted a big Australian flag there as well. That this is not about us huddling back into our corner and saying we're Jews and that's our only identity. We wanted... No, we're proud Australian Jews, and Australia affords us luxuries as a minority because it's a democracy, and it means that we get to practice in peace, and it means that we get protections under that democracy that are absolutely as equal as anyone else's protection of freedom of speech. So we wanted to be very clear on that. We put up Australian flags and Israeli flags around the bus park and around the campus.
Good.
We spoke to... the morning of, I spoke to primary staff and secondary staff. I wanted our staff members to really have an understanding, well, what do I do? I've got a prep class. And a handful of kids, it would have been spoken about back at home.
Yeah, of course.
And other children, the last thing in the world their parents want is their children knowing about this or hearing about this. How does a teacher manage that when they say, all right, well, what did you do on the weekend? And a kid puts up their hand and goes, oh, this is what happened. And do you know? And people are trying to kill us. And trying to manage those expectations. So talking to teachers about where that line is and how we can manage that. That was incredibly important.
Where is that line?
So it's interesting. So we discussed some of the challenges about what we define. We always talk about age-appropriate education. And that's an easy tagline to say, but it's actually age and stage. So some kids, if you're the youngest out of three and you're hearing stuff from your big brother and sister, the world is a much more open place for you and a rawer place. So we spoke to teachers about, we deal with this all the time. We deal with this, day to day when a child's grandparent dies and another child has never really contemplated death in any way, and that gets discussed. It happens when we talk about Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaShoah, and what does that look like in a primary school classroom? So our teachers are they're experts at this.
Okay.
So we reminded teachers about where that line is and said, some things might need private conversations. And sometimes students need to be told that's not an appropriate conversation for now, but we will talk about it later. And just trying to respect parents' wishes, that some parents don't want this to be front and centre for their children. It was interesting.
It's a difficult balance.
Yeah, yesterday when we had Senator Henderson speaking to our primary school.
Oh, right.
And which was a wonderful opportunity. I didn't want the primary students to be left out of what was going on, but I wanted it to be appropriate for them. And it was just, you had some kids, innocently putting up their hands and asking about what it's like to work in Parliament and why did you choose that job? And that was lovely.
Yeah.
And then and then a child would put up their hand and say, "Can you please help tell the government that Jews aren't bad?" Mm. And suddenly it's just brought back down to earth, and you're like, oh, oof. And you could see on her face, on the staff member's face, like, these are the conversations that are happening at home.
You've heard from government as well, though.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I know the Deputy Prime Minister has been very strong.
Yeah, to have a local member out, to have the member for McNamara out. Yeah. Josh Burns was great in calling me and coordinating for the Deputy Prime Minister to come out. Mm-hmm. I felt that was incredibly important. I know that the community is struggling right now when it comes to politics.
Yes.
I think there are those in the community who may have always supported either Labor or Liberal, but now a very strong sense of we're not feeling the love maybe from the Foreign Minister, we're not feeling the love from the Prime Minister right now.
There's a lot of that.
And while there are plenty who say, no, we are, and we have to, be careful here and not mix international politics with what's happening to the Jewish community. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, it is a massive dilemma for the Jewish community right now.
It is an incredible dilemma and leads to a lot of angry discussions.
Absolutely. These are the Shabbat table dinner discussions right now are pretty
fiery. Yes.
But look, I'll be honest with you. Yesterday I had a moment while I actually didn't realise I was going to be speaking to this media gaggle, and the Deputy Prime Minister sort of just turned to me and said, "Right, well, Dan, you'll speak first, and then Josh, you'll say, and he sort of just jumped in straight away, and all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm speaking to the media. I really wasn't expecting that.
Oh, really?
So off I went, and sort of thinking what I was going to say a few seconds before I said it, and while I was
you spoke very well, I must say.
Oh, thank you. It was maybe it was better you didn't prepare me, but I remember feeling that a part of me wants to say that I've been really devastated with the lack of action by government.
You mean in a general sense, not pertaining to the daubing of the school?
No. So to say,
in general,
look, the action by government based on what happened at our school, unbelievable. Like, I'm talking state and federal. They were onto it. People were speaking, asking what they could do to help, and I wasn't being shy about what I wanted. But they were fantastic. But when I think about the rise of antisemitism in Australia right now, I personally believe the government has been slow to act.
Yes.
I think they have said many of the right things that people like to hear. I don't know that that's been followed up with any clear direction or action. Yeah. And when I was speaking to the media, a part of me wanted to call that out in a very big way and potentially very much embarrass 3 parliamentarians who had come to support our school. And there's a moment where you're thinking, well, what's the right thing to do on behalf of the community? And I think the fact of the matter is we also need to look at it from the point of view of we have enjoyed in Australia a long period where Israel has not been a partisan issue. The Labor, the coalition, they have both for the most part supported Israel. Now, we can argue about what that support looks like and how much.
Yes, that's right.
But if you look around the world and you look in most countries, Israel's already a partisan issue. It has been for a very long time.
Especially Europe.
Absolutely. And I feel as though as a community, we've got to be, we've got to think what we want. What do we want for the future, not just right now? And I think that, every political party has its factions and its different groups.
Yes.
And in many respects, I feel a little bit like, judging by who picked up the phone to come and speak, to speak to me, who wanted to come and speak to our students. Certainly I felt you could almost see the boundaries within the political party of who sat on what side. And again, maybe I'm exaggerating it in my mind, but just based on my limited understanding of of Australian politics, I felt, you know what, no, there are people who have stood up to say, we are going to go to a school, we are going to stand up with the community, knowing full well that both the students at the school and the media are going to ask us tough questions on what are you doing as government? And that's healthy. They should be asked those questions. And you know what? Our students were fantastic. They asked brilliant questions saying, we're so almost every question started the same way. We're so thankful that you're here. We're so happy that you've come to support us. Thank you for being here. What is the government doing to stop the anti-Semitism on university campuses? I'm in year 12. I'm worried about what university I can go to. What are you doing?
Who was that posed to?
So that was posed mainly to, well, it was posed to all three parliamentarians who were there, but it was mainly posed to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's a very tough question to answer when you've got the International Criminal Court case, when you've got Australia's position with the United Nations right now, when you've got so many things that are going on where Australia is involving itself in the current war in Gaza, and trying to take a position, and maybe the cynic in me says, looking at upcoming elections and marginal seats and where are the votes going to come from and all those sorts of things, and they're juggling a lot of different things. But I do think at the end of the day there are a lot of parliamentarians who want to be on the right side of this. They want to be supporting the community, and not just by coming out and saying anti-Semitism is wrong. It takes no guts for a politician to say that.
That's right.
It takes guts to say, you know what, we actually need to help the Australian community define what hate speech is and where the line is. We need to be able to pick up the phone to vice-chancellors at universities and say, we are going to help you with some guidance here because you're clearly looking like you're lost and you're not sure what Australian values say you should do. And what
so this is a summary of what he said?
No, it's not. Sorry, I was putting my own words in.
No, that's fine. That's fine. They're good words. We might elect you.
No, look, and it's always easy to say when you're not.
Exactly.
When you're not a politician. But and there'll be plenty of people that say, oh, it's easy for the opposition to say X, Y, and Z. But I do think that at the end of the day, the Jewish community need to be speaking to our members of parliament, and we need to be saying we need more than just the anti-Semitism is wrong message.
Yes.
We actually want you to get in contact with universities. That is the hotbed right now that is breeding a whole new version of anti-Semitism. And it's interesting because I think the traditional hard right anti-Semitism, they knew they were being anti-Semitic.
Yes.
And I genuinely believe that this new anti-Semitism on the left, they believe that they're being righteous. Not all of them, but I'm saying the useful idiots that have joined some of these movements, they genuinely are there believing they are on the right side of history. They are the Vietnam War protester of their generation. And in many respects, what's desperately needed, because their information source is just so corrupted now.
Yes.
And I'm not saying, whether it be pro-Palestinian, be anti-Palestinian, whatever it is, I'm not making a statement on that, but it is up to universities to actually say, we're not just for free everything. We are for informed discussion. We're we're a place where people should be able to disagree, but with substance and depth.
Yeah, and speech comes with responsibility. Because when you're saying something, you have an intention, but you also have an impact. And you've got to think about both of those.
Absolutely.
And too few people do. I want to ask you about the journey from Dan the Scopus kindergarten kid to the principal of Mount Scopus College, Australia's largest Jewish school. Yeah. That's quite a journey.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's, we're going from one thing to a very different one. Look, it's. I feel incredibly privileged. I'm sitting in an office not more than 50 metres away from the kindergarten I was in when I was 3 years old, and it's been a little bit of a welcome home for me. It's. You
were at Bialik for
13 years.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I was there for quite a while. But But, I went through all of my schooling at Scopus Burwood. So I was, I know that, there are many people that went through GBH and FKI, but no, I was or Q or, but I went all the way through Burwood, and Scopus was phenomenal for me. It was, I don't know how much I always focused on my studies. I may have not been, the star student all the way through my schooling. But what I loved was just the amount of things that were on offer. And I think it very much produced the type of person I became, because I am someone that likes to put up my hand and say, oh, okay, there's something going on there. I want to go check it out, and I want to see it, and I want to get involved. And, whether it's, putting up my hand to run in Glenara Council, or, putting up my hand to become involved with, communal organisations, Zionism Victoria, whatever it is. Or, many years ago when I was a lot younger and lighter, the CSG and those sorts of things. It came from my Scopus experience, where you went through school and you weren't thinking about, it wasn't just, okay, I've got maths next and then I've got English, but it's also at lunchtime I'm going to be running this club, and then, at recess I'm going to be having a meeting about this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to go on this excursion. And there was so much opportunity for students to get involved.
I was going to say, that's the word. It gives you broad opportunities.
And that's what my schooling was. So the idea that, very much is that experience made me into who I am today, and I'm so thankful for that. But it also meant, I went off and I did a whole lot of other things. I came back and actually taught at Mount Scopus for a number of years.
Right.
So
that was your first teaching job back at Scopus?
It wasn't my first job in education,
right,
but it was my first standard classroom teaching job.
Right.
And it was very odd. It was in my very Year 7 homeroom class, my mech class. There I was becoming the Year 7A mech.
Wow.
I was actually on my teaching rounds, and I took over from a teacher who was pregnant at the time. She went on maternity leave, and I was asked, I wasn't even qualified yet, but, there was a thing called permission to teach. You were allowed to get registered because you were almost a teacher.
Yeah.
And in I went, and, straight into the hot seat, and that was fantastic, and that was a great experience. I was teaching Jewish studies and working in experiential Jewish education, having a great time. And after a little while, I was afforded a wonderful opportunity. There was an opportunity both at Scopus and an opportunity at Bialik. It was a nice moment to be wanted.
Good to be wanted, yes.
And it was at that time one of the hardest decisions professionally I ever had to make.
I can imagine, yes.
And I remember, chatting to my wife, and, we didn't even have kids at that stage, and talking about, my gosh, this is huge. And she was a Bialik girl and I was a Scopus boy.
Okay. Mixed marriage.
We had a mixed marriage, and we were having a chat about that. And in the end, I had the opportunity to go and head up the Jewish life side of the school at Bialik, and I wanted to take up that opportunity. It was just too good to pass up. So I said farewell to Rabbi Kennard and thanked him, and he was really gracious and fantastic about that. And then went and took on a wonderful role at Bialik, which I loved, and it's an incredible school.
Yes, it is.
And, it's one of the beautiful things about our community that I think most people in Melbourne don't recognise it. There are very few other Jewish communities around the world where you're not choosing, do I want a good education or do I want a good Jewish education? Do I want awesome sports opportunities, or do I want,
communal
involvement?
Yeah.
And we are blessed. Like the fact that, you can really separate out. This is exactly the flavour of Jewish school that I want.
Yes.
And I get to get good results there, and I get to have all these awesome opportunities. And while there are absolutely differences between the schools, we get to choose between them. And when I think about, smaller communities in Australia, you think about the Perth Jewish community, and they've got Carmel School.
Yep.
And it's one size fits all, and you've just got to accept it.
That's right.
And there's something quite lovely about that, because it creates a beautiful melting pot. But I think when I think of what we offer in Melbourne,
I think it's quite unique.
Where else in the world would this be? Maybe unique. Some places in South America, maybe, but across the Jewish world, this just doesn't exist. This choice where all the schools do well at most things. Do I believe Scopus does a little bit better at some things? Absolutely. I'm going to be biased. I will say that. But generally, we're lucky. We are blessed.
We are blessed for choice of Jewish education and Zionist education as well. I think that's a strong flavour as well that we enjoy. Is it going to become too costly? Is it going to become prohibitive in the long term? We've had that report, a year or two ago about the future of Jewish day schools in Melbourne. I'm not sure where that's going. But, obviously it's getting more and more expensive. There's probably a smaller proportion of our students who are going to Jewish day schools these days because of the cost.
So you asked, is it getting too expensive? It got too expensive a long time ago. I think we're definitely, there's a fear that we will lose the thing that makes our community great, which has been so many of our adults were children at Jewish schools. They were students. They got to have the benefit of a Jewish education. And we take that for granted now because I understand the very tough decisions that families have to make. It's a huge sacrifice.
It's a massive decision.
Yes. And while, yes, I can say that any person in the Jewish community who wants a Jewish education for their child can get it. And I'm not making a value judgment here at all. People have to make
their own priorities, yeah. Sure.
But for some of those families, for a lot of those families, the decision to say we're going to go with Jewish education means sacrificing so many other things.
Yep.
So, yes, because of the incredible opportunities of means tested fee assistance and all of these sorts of things, and the schools have fantastic setups, and certainly, I can say across Scopus we've got all different sorts of avenues to support families, but it's a huge sacrifice. And because of the choices that people are making, and they're very legitimate, and I understand those choices, when you make a choice not to send your child to a Jewish school, it may serve many other purposes and there may be lots of other benefits they get. But what it means is we've now got a huge cohort of graduates in the wider graduates in the wider Melbourne Jewish community who haven't gone through a Jewish school experience, where their understanding of Hagim, their understanding of Jewish communal life, it's hopefully very family based.
Well, that's right.
But on a communal level, I feel that we lose a lot. And definitely there are youth movements, but let's be honest, numbers at Jewish youth movements and Zionistic youth movements are down. I think, there are Jewish sports clubs and they are incredibly valuable, when you think of your Maccabis and your Ajaxes.
Maccabi is the biggest Jewish organisation in Australia.
Correct. and they're doing a tremendous job.
Yeah.
But they're limited in terms of the scope of what they can offer. They can offer the social, they can offer some communal experience. But in terms of offering a real Yiddishkeit, I'm worried. And the problem is we're going to have a community where things start to get diluted a little bit, that our identity gets a little bit diluted. And when we reach a time like now where our identity is under threat, I wonder how many people now feel more comfortable saying, I'm going to wear the Magen David inside the shirt. Now I'm not going to wear the Magen David at all.
I might wear my kippah on the street.
And there was something to tie back in with what you said right at the beginning of our interview. There's something very interesting. Last night I was able to attend this incredible documentary that Josh Frydenberg has put together.
That's going to be public tonight.
Yeah. And I was very moved by it. I think it was a very interesting piece of work, and I'm not going to go in and critique it here, but I will say that I do think it is really worth seeing. It's worth watching. It articulates a mood, a feeling Jews have in their gut right now in Melbourne. It is articulated on the screen for a Jewish and a non-Jewish audience. It does that well. But what I noticed there that came up for me is it talked about those people in the arts now, those people in journalism, in those sorts of traditional left spaces, left-wing spaces. There's a force that's telling them you can't have a position on Israel or a position on your Jewish identity that conflicts with our institution or who we are or what this, suburb over here feels. And what I'm scared of is I can see already in our community that, whether it's journalists who only want to talk about particular sides of the issue because they know full well that if they went the other way, they would lose their livelihood, their positions, their, you know, and again, I'm not saying any one person in particular, but I do think there is a strong movement in the arts right now, in journalism right now, that says, you know, you need to separate your Judaism from who you are as an Australian, and we will only accept this. And it's strange. It's not the first time this has happened. This has always been the case since modernity for us. But when I couple that with Jewish schooling, and I think how many kids are not going to have a basis of intense Yiddishkeit given at a Jewish school, so they have a foundation of, no, I am a Jew and I'm proud to be. And it's not just a tack onto my identity, but it's a core piece of my identity. It's not that Jewish school is the only place you can get that.
Of course not.
But it makes a big difference.
Yes, it does.
So I'm worried.
Dan, thank you for your time. You've been very open about your feelings, and I hope you get over what happened on Shabbat and everything. I'm sure you will, and I think you're addressing it very positively, which is good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do just want to say to everyone out there, just we've received so much support from everyone, both in the Jewish community and the non-Jewish community. It is actually quite lovely. And I think if I could leave with one message, I would say, never for a moment don't think that there aren't thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there that support the Jewish community, that support Israel, that can see nonsense when it's out there and just reject it. And I'm just so proud of so many people that have come to support us. So thank you.
That's terrific. Thank you.